Now that in the first part I have established how I can reconcile hell with reason, while being as faithful as possible to Tim Keller's views, I will move to give my personal moral evaluations of hell's alleged purposes. In the essay The Importance of Hell, Tim Keller writes, quote, "I believe one of the reasons the Bible tells us about hell is so it can act like smelling salts about the true danger and the seriousness of even minor sins. However, I've found that only stressing the symbols of hell in preaching, rather than going into what the symbols refer to, actually prevents modern people from finding hell a deterrent. I remember a man who said that talk about the fires of hell simply didn't scare him. It seemed too far-fetched, even silly. So I read him lines from C.S. Lewis. Hell begins with a grumbling mood, always complaining, always blaming others, but you're still distinct from it. You may even criticize it in yourself and wish you could stop it. But there may come a day when you can no longer. Then there will be no you left to criticize the mood or even to enjoy it, but just the grumble itself, going on forever like a machine. It is not a question of God sending us to hell. In each of us there is something growing, which will be hell unless it is nipped in the bud." He almost immediately began to see that hell was A. perfectly fair and just, and B. something he might be headed for if he didn't change. If we really want skeptics and non-believers to be properly frightened by hell, we must go deeper into the realities that the biblical images represent." End quote. My turn. Sins are allegedly so dangerous because God has given limited possibilities to His children after their physical deaths. If He were to concede them the freedom to end their existences when these become unbearable, the frightening factor of sinful behavior would consist in the loss of well-being during one's existence due to a non-optimal set of mind. Taking away this freedom might persuade more people to accept the message due to stronger fear, but the price for those who don't will be greater. I think humans can reach greater emotional depths in suffering than in feeling pleasure, so I don't accept that giving more people the possibility of salvation is worth the damnation of those who will not reach it. I will come back to the efficiency of hell as a deterrent in a bit. Keller states, "The doctrine of hell is important because it is the only way to know how much Jesus loved us and how much He did for us." He then asserts that on the cross Jesus not only died of a painful physical death, but was also forsaken from His Father and experienced hell itself. And since Jesus was God reincarnated, it follows that God Himself was willing to suffer hell, so to pay off our sins. Also, the bond between Jesus and His Father was so deep that their separation for 3 hours only entailed more suffering than all of our deserved hells put together. I believe that all Jesus should have done was endure incredible suffering we could empathize with. There was no necessity of establishing hell as punishment for the failure to accept God's grace. This addition actually makes the message of love appear shallower, as God is vengeful towards those who fail Him. Also, it's usually recognized by apologists that you cannot avoid hell by trying to move towards God, motivated mainly by fear, as fear makes you more self-centered and draws you away from God's grace. Hell undoubtedly raises fear in people's hearts, so I don't believe in its usefulness as a means to an end, the end being having more people come to God. Hell appears more a device for God to satisfy his anger. It's therefore necessary to elaborate a justification for God's wrath. In order to do this, in his essay Preaching Hell in a Tolerant Age, Keller writes, quote, "What rankles many people today is the wrath of God. I can't believe in a God who sends people to suffer eternally. What kind of a loving God is filled with wrath? So in preaching about hell, we must explain that a God without wrath is a God without love. Here is how I tried to do that in a sermon. People ask, what kind of a loving God could be filled with wrath? But any loving person is often filled with wrath. In Hope Has Its Reasons, Becky Pippert writes, quote, "Think how we feel when we see someone we love ravaged by unwise actions or relationships. Do we respond with benign tolerance as we might toward strangers? Far from it. Anger isn't the opposite of love. Hate is, and the final form of hate is indifference." End quote. Pippert then quotes E.H. Gifford, quote, "Human love here offers a true analogy. The more a father loves his son, the more he hates in him the drunkard, the liar, the traitor." End quote. She concludes, quote, "If I, a flawed, narcissistic, sinful woman, can feel this much pain and anger over someone's condition, how much more a morally perfect God who made them? God's wrath is not a cranky explosion, but his settled opposition to the cancer of a sin which is eating out the insides of the human race he loves with his whole being." End quote. This is why faithful and balanced preaching on this subject must depict hell as both the result of a human choice and of divine judgment. God must, and does, actively judge and reject those who have rejected him. End quote. My opinion. In the instance of intimate relationships, whenever a person does not meet the expectations I had for her, disappointment arises. Such disappointment can lead to different reactions. One of them can be resentment. A person who I cared for has hurt me, so I feel betrayed in my hopes, as if something that was owed to me has been snatched away. I believe this. When a person disappoints my expectations, I should think, how much do I care about that person? Because I believe that by reacting with anger at her actions, in most instances, I'll be showing that I only deem others' well-being important as long as they respect my standards of behavior. The better thing for me to do would be to try and find an efficient way to make the person understand her errors, were I to judge it necessary. Wrath isn't a device I deem very useful for such purpose, because it's usually aimed at persuading the person through intimidation, not by making her think about whether what she did was wrong. Failing that, I will try and raise beneath my ego and not satisfy my bitterness upon that who has disappointed me, because if I were to do so, I would be harming another solely to satisfy an urge of revenge. In conclusion, I don't agree with Keller that wrath is a necessary consequence of love, but more of a desire of dominance over other people. Consider now that God's wrath can only be satisfied by inflicting hell upon his children who have disappointed him. Such a single-minded desire of vengeance can only be representative of an incredibly callous individual, devoid of compassion. The most bitter, abusive father of this planet would be put to shame in comparison to him. To sum up, I believe Tim Keller's attempts to reconcile hell with reason and God's goodness fail miserably and succeed only in showing off his own personal twisted sense of morality. Thank you for watching.